Warm welcome to all of you in today's session at PM at Scale. And this is the very first session that we are hosting here at Insaid for. So let's begin the first session with a bang. And to ensure that we have a blast over the next one hour, we've gotten a very exciting speaker. So our speaker for today is Pankaj Sharma. He's the senior product manager at Microsoft. So today we're going to learn firsthand from Pankaj, who's been kind of actively contributing to the growth of Microsoft story. And as all of you know, Microsoft has been kind of growing leaps and bounds, even after, in spite of being such a big company, right? So today Pankaj is going to share us some very valuable insights around customer, around products. How do you think about it, and then how do you secure feedback from your customers to grow your product better? So with that, I would like to kind of get started with the session, and I hope all of you are able to hear me loud and clear. First of all, a big thank you to you, Pankaj. We are extremely happy that you accepted our invite and you wanted to kind of come forward and share your knowledge. We really appreciate your efforts here. And yeah, any initial welcome words for our audience here?
Sure. Thank you so much, Sujit. Yeah, it's always a pleasure to talk with the audience who are interested in PMing, right? I think in India, as we are building world-class products, it's necessary that we keep sharing what we are learning so that each of us can contribute, right? It's a small world. Technology is a small world, and as a PM myself, when I was growing, I always hoped that there were people who can help me to grow, and that's there has been a lot of people who actually helped me, and I just want to give back to the community in the way that if in any way I can help the new budding PMs or people who are already in PMing, if I can help them, that's something I really look forward to.
That's awesome, Pankaj, and that's why it's all the more valuable for us that you are so happy to and so eager to share your valuable knowledge with us. So, Pankaj, a lot of us, including me, so we have been eagerly waiting for these boot camps, especially for two reasons. One is as learners of product management, we always keep trying to understand what is the right way to think about products. Uh, but the right way to think about products from 0 to 1 versus 1 to 10, okay, that's kind of a massively different ballgame altogether. So the second point that's actually in continuation to the first one is that let's say we are currently learning the basics of it. Okay, so we are in the very initial phases. Uh, but what would really be awesome is when you can relate to what PMS for a scalable audience. So when we talk scale, we are talking about millions and billions, right? So everybody knows Microsoft; they have like millions and millions of users. So how is the thought process very different? How do you think what a person does in the initial stages versus what they do now? Okay, if you can also draw some analogies there, that'll be a great value add for us, right? So,
Sure.
yeah, thanks for that. So, I'll hand over the session to you, Pankaj. And yeah, we are super excited to learn quite a bit from you. Just a quick reminder, we need some 10 minutes of your time towards the end for some Q&A from the audience.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think I should be able to cover everything in like 40 minutes. So that should leave us 10 to 15
10 to
minutes in
15
the
minutes.
end so that we can, yeah.
That'll be wonderful. That'll be wonderful, Pankaj. I think, yeah, then we are good to go. So, all over to you, Pankaj. I'll now be on mute and I'll hide myself so that everybody can focus on you. Thank
Sure.
you.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks so much. So let me know if you guys are able to see my screen.
Yeah, the presentation is visible.
Awesome. Great. So first I will do a small introduction about myself and how we are going to plan today. I will talk about it. We will get the basics out of the discussion and then we will deep dive into the session. So my name is Pankaj Sharma. I have 14 years of experience in technology industry. Currently, I'm working with Microsoft on Azure products. In past, I have worked with Paytm as GM of Data, AVP of Aspiring Minds leading product and analytics team. And I have helped building a BU at Nagaro. Before that, I worked as a software developer and tech lead architect, right? So I have been very fortunate to explore the multiple facets of technology companies, right? And this includes product management, technical program management, software development, business dev, and pre-sales. And I have crisscrossed, right? It has not been a straight journey from one role to another. So it has been for last few years, I have been actively focusing on product management, user experience, data-driven decision making, and building scalable systems. With focus is the products, whether it's enterprise, B2C, it should have a focus on customer. They are scalable and resilient, right? So one of the things that happens is when you are building a product, uh, to start with, it's a MVP. The goal is to get things quickly out, right? But as you see usage, you start realizing the components that you have built might not be the same, or the strategies you have for initial 0 to 1 is not same as 1 to 10, right? We will talk about it in details, but yeah, that's the shift we need to have. And some of the things that we are going to talk about today is going to help you to understand if you are at that 1, how you can reach out to 10, because reaching from 1 to 10 needs some sort of a different thinking when you are thinking from 0 to 1. So uh, the format that we are going to follow today is I will go through the session. As I have a single screen, might not be able to take all the questions while the presentation is going on. So please put your questions on chat. What we will do is we will respond the Q&As that are in chat first, and then we can take the further questions if there are any, because it might be difficult to switch in between. So that's the way would be preferable for me. And if there's any question before we start, more than happy to take questions at this point in time.
I think let's go through the entire presentation and then we'll take up some questions towards the end.
Sure. Yeah. Sounds good. So today what I'm going to talk about is how as a PM, you can exploit the feedback systems, right? And build an iterative product strategy. While this is a very vast topic and each slide that we are going to cover today can have a 1 or more longer discussions, so we are not going to dig very deep on the things we are going to talk about. The idea is, or objective is to give you a high level view of these topics and uh, share how we can think holistically about feedback channels and your product strategies and roadmaps that you are building over a period of time. So any PM series deck without a Dilbert insight, I think it missed something. So that's why I have put this. And it is something that is relevant to today's discussion we are going to have, because the feedback and the channels we are going to talk about is going to generate a humongous amount of data and information, right? So if you keep on adding whatsoever you hear, whatsoever people tell you, it would be a hodgepodge of complexity, right? Well, it's going to succeed or not as a secondary thing, but just listening out does not help, right? So how you actually think about it and then try to assimilate information out of it to build insights is something that is really useful for all the PMs who. So yeah, with that, I will jump into the agenda of for the today. So when we are talking about the agenda, as we are talking a lot, what I have been trying to do is trying to create some sort of an island. So out of these whole large areas, which are important for today's discussion. And first thing we are trying to talk about is how you can understand your users, their needs, how you can actually think about implementing the listening channels, or what are the different listening channels you can tap into, which might already exist. The second thing, the focus of the second part would be how you understand the feedback, right? And qualitative and quantitative both. Here again, I won't be talking about all the channels. I have something specific I want to discuss about. While all the channels are important and there are different ways to look at it, I would be focusing on some of the specific channels and see what I have learned and how I have done things, right? Then we will take a quick look at what product strategy and roadmap means in general, and then talk about how you actually take the inputs that through the feedback channels and then try to respond with actionable key results. And in the end, we will talk quickly about how you can use the inputs that you have to build an iterative product strategy, right? So this is the kind of agenda what I'm trying to cover today. While what we are discussing today is applicable for enterprise as well as B2C space, my major focus has been around enterprise products in last few years. So yeah, while creating this presentation, I did have a lot more focus towards enterprise than B2C, saying that if there are any specific questions, I can answer those and we can think through in terms of the B2C versus B2B or enterprise scenarios, right? And one disclaimer, as everyone here, I am also a learner. It's a learning journey. None of us fully understand this area. So a lot of this comes from experience and what we have done. It might be optimal for some situation and not optimal for some, right? So when you are doing something like this, you should think in terms of what should be suitable or best fit for the scenario that you are working in. All right. So with this, now we will jump into the next first part of our presentation, which is about understanding users and implementing listening channels. While what I'm again covering here is not exhaustive, it is something that I have been using and it has worked for me in the past. So while you are trying to build a new product, I think, or even you are thinking in terms of new features, how do you go about understanding the user needs, right? So while there can be a mandate to build a product or feature, first thing you can do is you can do user surveys, right? That is the easier thing to do. If you have channels, if you have teams, or there are teams, organizations out there who can actually help you with the user surveys. Second thing is interviews, and interviews are very interesting, right? Because you can run interviews for the user research in a lot of different ways, right? So Google can have its Google Sprint. There are other ways you can try to do interviews also, right? So there are different ways you can think about interviews. And within these interviews, you can also think about the usability test, right? So if you already have a hypothesis available, if you think this is the way to go, you can go ahead and create some sort of a mock-ups and do a usability test, right? Some of the companies also call it a moneyballing technique, where they will not build actual product, but just go to the interviews with a already created workflow, which is on presentation or any which ways, right? Or cards, and then do a usability test with the user to understand what is their propensity for the product. Then there are the secondary channels that are very helpful, right? So one of the secondary channel, or one of the important channel, is market trend analysis, right? So where the industry is heading to. There are different frameworks such as PEST, etc., that people use to do market trend analysis. But yeah, that's a good way to understand where in 2 years, 5 years down the line, the advisories and others are seeing the market to be heading to, right? And then you can also align your product roadmap and your vision to those things. And if there's a mismatch, there's always a way to calibrate it, right? And the other important aspect is, if you are in a space where there are competitors, it's very, very necessary that you keep an eye on your competitors and understand what they are trying to do, right? Because it's an ecosystem. So in an ecosystem, understanding your competitors' move is really, really helpful. So this is the part where you have initially thought about a product, right? Once you build a product, the next part comes is, hey, somebody has started using my product. What's happening there, right? What is the user behavior? We thought something will happen in a particular way. Is it happening in that particular way? How the product interactions are going, right? And there are different ways that you can think about the user behavior and product interactions. And before getting into the user behavior and product interaction, one thing I will also want to call out: when you are thinking about user need, just don't focus about jobs to be done, right? There is a lot of focus today where people say that, hey, can we focus on jobs to be done? What is needed by the customer, right? I think that is an important view, but you need to have an empathetic viewpoint of the customer, right? By having an empathetic viewpoint of customer, what it means is that walking the same path of your customer, living the pain, feeling their needs, deeply understanding whether that solution will actually solve the problem for the customer or not, right? So let's take an example, simple example, right? You are trying to build a monitoring product for a IT pro who is in a organization, large organization managing the IT systems. Uh, while this tool can be a great help for the IT pros or the IT persons, what if this tool just caters to one kind of platforms? Let's say it's only focuses on Windows or Linux or Android or iOS, right? Not all, right? Then the user have to have these multiple views that he needs to track. So how do you build the end-to-end view so that a person who is using your product does not have to look at different places? The more the tool is integrated, the more value it can provide to your users in most of the scenarios. So that's the way you should think about it, that, hey, that's the first step. Second is monitoring is just not about uh, seeing that there's something wrong, right? It's also about informing somebody who might be responsible for that system, right? IT guys won't be, there would be somebody else in the engineering team who would be responsible for that. So how do you think about it? Can you build something that automates this journey where while the IT person also knows that, oh, hey, there is some issue going on, the person who needs to respond is also informed and they can take action, right? So, and if you want to go a step further, can there the action be also integrated in your product so that the person don't have to move out of the purview of your product and everything happens on that, right? So that's the way you have to think. So first part is what is the context of the user is, and then think how it will solve the user's problem. Because if you think of monitoring tools, somebody will just think that, okay, just give the data to somebody and they should be able to act on it, right? That is one part of solving the problem. That can be your MVP, but the whole idea is that if you want to build a lovable product, it has to do a lot more, right? It has to integrate with a lot more tools. It has to consume a lot more information, and it has to be able to do a lot more so that customers are able to use that tool. Yeah, so now I will jump into the understanding user behavior and product interactions part, right? So there are multiple ways these things can be done, right? Product telemetry is you can build logging in your applications, you can build logging in your infrastructure, you can build logging into your apps, and that can provide you a lot of rich data, and we will see how those can be used. The second is user analytics tools such as Google Analytics, etc. You can simply add some code snippets in your product and you will start seeing a lot of great information that might be very useful for your product. Third is monitoring tools, which are generally thought to be about engineering, but yeah, we will talk in details about them. And fourth is the support request, which comes where support team gets involved once a customer is actually feeling the pain, right? And we will see how these can be a great way of understanding about user behavior, your product, and how you can actually make products which users love. So some of the other channels that can exist, which we sometimes call as voice of customers, right? This can come from a CSAT. If you're measuring CSAT, you know how your product is performing. Or if you're calculating NPS, you know that how is, again, what is the scale and how you're measuring it, right? Then there's the important aspect is that if you have a sales team, right? Generally pre-sales or sales team would be there. They are great people to hear what customers are telling you, right? Because when they make a call, they hear some responses from the customers in terms of, hey, I didn't like, my friend is using your product, these are the challenges they are facing, right? Or hey, somebody told us that this is a great product, these are the features that are already there in the product, right? So sales representative or sales channel is a strong way of getting inputs from your customers. The second is the large organizations, sometimes such as Microsoft or Google and Amazon of the world, they also have the implementation and field teams, right? Which actually uses your product for the customer, right? And they are great people, they are within your organization, they know the actual pain customers go through, they know what are the challenges when they are implementing your tool, right? These are the great information channel for you, right? In last few years, I personally have learned so much from the field teams, and actually we have used some of these feedbacks from these field teams to actually build our features roadmap also. Then next is social chatter. If you have a product which is loved and used by millions of products, you will definitely have a viewpoint out there. So it's good to track and see how socially what people are telling. Is there any a positive response, negative response? What is the sentiment around your product is, right? And there is all kind of sentiment analysis tool available today that can give you that information. Then if your product is an app, or if your product is get it listed in some marketplace, there are ratings available, which gives you a good idea in terms of how the product is being used by different people. And then if you want to include specific, if you want to learn specific things from the customers, you can always have the forms that you can create and put it in your products. You can have links, and then you can reach out to your customers, right? Generally, there is always a way for you to talk to your customers. So always think about these channels when you are thinking of improving your product or in general. Yeah. So with this, we will get into specifics of some of these channels that are there. So first, I'm going to talk about product telemetry. It's a great way to get insights into a product, right? It becomes a very effective way as you have ability to introduce all kind of logging and measurement, right? Whatsoever you want, you can measure it. If you use a standardized products, there's a possibility that some of the things are not available. If you want to measure specific kind of behavior, that might not be possible. But with your own product, you can add all kind of logging and telemetry that can give you a very good idea in terms of how your product is behaving. If you have a product that has multiple components, let's say there is no interconnectedness, one of your part of your product goes into a on-premise data center, and second product somewhere lives in a cloud, right? There's no way that you can create an end-to-end journey using a standardized product. But if you have your product telemetry, if you have your own databases, you can build data marts where you can pull information from all these different components and create a single view of your product usage and how users are using the product, right? So this helps you to build a very clear-cut end-to-end customer journey. The product telemetry can also provide you a very granular transaction level views. Example is, as we discussed, that, okay, if there's a on-prem component and if there is a SaaS component, how do you use that information? I will just pause for a second to drink a glass of water. So some of the questions that when you are looking at product telemetry, you should have in your mind, right? What you should be trying to know. Are your customers using the features you expect them to use? How are they engaging with your product? How frequently are users engaging with your product, and what is the duration and frequency, right? Duration and frequency becomes very important criteria when you are working with products which are where you are trying to build some sort of habits, right? What settings options are you using, right? If you have multiple paths, workflows in your product, are you measuring how users are going through different journeys within your product, right? If you are using any kind of displays, input modalities, orientations of screen or device configuration, all this can be measured using your product telemetry. What happens when crashes occur, right? Are you actually having ways to measure your system stability and logging the information about those failures so that you can help your customers to fix those issues, right? And what are the context around all this, right? So if you think in those terms, what you are going to get is you are going to define some sort of a product usage matrices and funnels, right? So you might think, okay, these are X number of steps. How do I measure at each step, right? And that is one way of looking at product management, or sorry, product telemetry. The second thing is usage of features, as we discussed, right? It's very common in an enterprise product that you will have hundreds and hundreds of features, right? So product telemetry gives you a very good idea in terms of which product feature is being used most or which one is being used less, right? So that is really helpful. The next is product navigation, is something, as we talked about, if there are multiple flows, are you seeing how is flow happening across all the different possible navigation paths? And then you also have a way, if you're tracking crashes, if you're seeing the transaction failures, you can also identify product bugs from the product telemetry, which can reduce your time to actually respond to these issues before any customer reports. You can send out a notification, hey, we are already seeing this issue. We are going to fix it in this much time of hours, right? This is kind of building trust with the users once you are proactive than reactive, right? And product telemetry is great way to be having that proactiveness. Also, while there are monitoring tools we will talk about, which also provide some sort of proactiveness, and we will talk about in the coming slides. All right. So that was about product analytics, right? And next we are talking about user analytics tools, right? And we talked, there are multiple user analytics tools, GA, Clever Tap, etc., etc. One of the ways these tools get used a lot of times is to find how you can actually acquire customers, how you can do a customer retention and growth, right? For example, a financial services app could learn that, okay, my social channel, which is Facebook, LinkedIn, etc., out of which Facebook is doing great, right? That is the best candidate for the acquisition of new customers, right? If you are able to know that, you can increase your social media spend on a particular platform and decrease it on others, or see if there is a change that needs to be happen on the other, right? Same way that happens with that enterprise solutions, they can look at, hey, what is that kind of the flow, or what are the cohorts, what is the life cycle of a customer? A customer comes in first week, what they do, second week, what they do, and nth week, what they do, right? This gives you an idea. If there are multiple stages in your product, you can understand that not all users will go through the same path, but you can build a cohort. Okay, there are step 1 generally takes 1 to 3 weeks, step 2 takes 4 to 6 weeks, step 3 takes 1 week, right? Then if you have this kind of a view, what the next thing you can do is you can think about optimizing something, right? Is there a way you can reduce the time of step 1 versus step 2, or can you make the step 1 and step 2 in parallel, so that the step 3, which might be the final outcome, can be done faster? So this is something that is really, really helpful, right? And when we are thinking about these tools, right, what we should think when we are implementing these user analytics tools. Once, are they tracking users across all kind of platforms, right? It's essential that you are not missing any of the channels, whether it's a desktop, mobile, or any other, right? Second is, are the pre-built reports available, right? It's a great way, right? So second is definitely that reporting capabilities you should have, because if you don't have the great reporting capabilities, you won't be able to see great dashboards, etc., and create a view out of it, or you have to put extra effort and money for that, right? So see if there are pre-built reports, and if what kind of reporting capabilities does that provide. Third is, there is some sort of marketing funnels already available, right? So if it's already providing you some sort of funnels, that's great. Anomaly detection and alerts, some of these tools do provide. Some of these tools also integrate with some of these anomaly detection systems or messaging system or A/B testing system, right? So see if in long term you are building a scalable product and you want to have all these features, so look at a product which have all these possibilities of integration, right? A single tool might not work best for you, so you might want to see that there's an interoperability that exists between these tools. All right. So for better view, you can, another thing you can do is, you have the product telemetry, you also have the user analytics tools, right? If you merge these data, right, and then you can build a very deep insights. It's more like you are going into a concept of data warehousing where you are trying to build data marts, OLAPs, or fact tables. But as your systems are going to grow, you would like to merge this all the information from product analytics as well as user analytics team, so that you are able to see information at one place. All right. Some of the basic things that also comes with these user analytics tools is user behavior funnel. So you can see the trend analysis, then there is journey analysis, there's a attribution analysis, you can do cohort analysis and retention analysis and that kind of thing, right? So that is something that you should keep in mind, that, okay, whatsoever is the platform you are choosing is able to do it for you. And second is platform specific behavior. With number of platforms out there, you would always want with smaller devices, IoT devices coming in, if your product is available on smartwatches, you need to see that, okay, that information is being captured by that particular tool, right? So that is platform specific behavior you are able to segregate and then drill down into. And definitely one thing these tools provide is user segmentations, right? User segmentation is a very good way for the B2C kind of products, right? Because it gives you a good view of what a customer looks like, right? So it also helps you to build a much deeper persona that you would be able to build when you are just you don't have that information, right? So sometimes this user segmentation is very useful even for your phase where you are trying to identify your actual users and their personas. And definitely with the failures, crash analytics, all those things, you should also be able to get the information around the bugs that are there. All right. So next, what we will jump into is customer support. Now, this is something that is very, very close to my heart, because this is an area we have invested a lot in last few years, and we have understood that while this is a very delayed, not very, but it's a delayed channel, and some things that happens are post facto, but it's the most credible and accurate channel for the customer feedback. And the second part is that while there are things might have gone wrong, there is a huge opportunity for you to do things in a way for your end customer that they might just love your product just because of the way you are able to support them, support your customers, right? So while there can be customers who may like to choose an easy route and just put in a support request, there are a lot of customers who put a lot of time before they reach out to the support team, right? And these are like the people who are actually can be proponents of your product, right? They can be the one who can be influencing their teams to further use your product. So ensure that when you are looking at this information, you ensure to take that in consideration and act on it. So one of the things I tell with most of the teams that I work with, whenever you are PM of a product, while it's not a very, I think, not a thing that people like to do, but you should always review the support request, right? While you don't do 100% of analysis, you should look into your support request to identify what are the problematic areas, right? The details shared by the customers have such a context that you might not have, right? And you might not even have thought about it when you are designing a product. So to give you an example, we have seen a lot of products which are there for disaster recovery are actually today used for the migration, right? While it's interrelated in some ways, you don't expect, right? And when you build your product, the behaviors defined in the disaster recovery product are not the optimal for the migration, right? But people are using it. And if you have that information, you have a way to actually build a feature that will solve a major customer problem, right? So that's where it's necessary that you go through the support tickets customers are raising, so that you have a very deep understanding of what your customers are feeling, how they are going through their day-to-day, and how they are solving the problems. Also, the second thing that happens with these support tickets is that it provides a very clear-cut problem type, right? A lot of times what happens is that the problem is not with the product, right? With enterprise product, with so many features, there is always a challenge related to educating or the documentation or building the video self-help content, right? So if you are looking at your support tickets, you would be clearly able to see that, hey, for this, we might not even need to fix the product. It's more to do with the customer education, and you can think in terms of blog posts, videos, or other ways, right? Where you can work with customers to build a product experience which is more streamlined, and they are able to use your product in a better way than they might be before they actually understood about your product, right? So it's very helpful to understand certain experiences can be hard for the customers and it's hard to navigate on their own, right? So if that is the scenario, it's always good to have a way for customers to know, hey, you are going to get stuck at this point. Can I provide you a documentation link at that particular point in time on that particular screen, which tells you what you need to do, or show you a video there itself saying that, hey, if you are facing this issue, you are not alone. Other people has also faced it. This is the way to solve it, right? So these kind of interventions make your product very, very useful, and customers really love if they are able to solve the problems on their own than actually to reach out to support teams. Also, there are scenarios where PMs and the engineering teams have to work with customer to troubleshoot or root cause the issue, right? If you are designing a logging system for your product, right, that is where it can be very useful that you think about these scenarios so that there's already available logging, so that even when your engineering team or you are getting in the calls with the customers, you are not running blind, right? You have the minimal information to start a discussion with customer and fix their problem. Right. So I think there are a lot of ways how you can ensure that your product teams or as a product managers, you are looking into support, right? So one of the things can be, can you have a support scrum, right? So support scrum is specifically where you are talking with your engineering leads and PMs about support and nothing else, right? You can ask your PMs if there are peers, or if you are the PM on the product, you can ask them, okay, if you can't look at all the support tickets, can you look at 5%, 10% and give a inputs on that, right? And then there are a lot of analytical tools are available, right, which can help you to group what customers are trying to say, or there are support teams out there which you can already go and talk with and say, hey, this is the kind of case we saw. Have you any inputs for us for the engineering team or PM team? And they will be happy to collaborate with you, right? So a support team is a great way to keep listening what customers are telling with your sales and field team, and then also train them so that they are able to reduce the customer pain time, right? Because more somebody have to be involved to solve a problem, the more time it's going to take, and the more customers wait, it's more painful for them, right? So the aim is always how you reduce that time customers have to wait for the solution if there is an issue, right? And keep on understanding what are the different scenarios where customers are trying to use your product, right? Because that can be the next revenue driver for you, right? Like for DR, migration becomes a next revenue driver, right? Or monitoring can be another thing, right? So there are a lot of different ways how your product can pivot over a period of time, and we will be talking about it in iterative product strategy part. So I would like to talk about some of the scenarios where we have actually been very fortunate to get some support requests, which actually helped us to reduce a lot of future pain, right? So one of the customer used our product on a very specific kind of a network setting, and the product did not work, right? And when we looked at telemetry, we were not able to understand what's happening, right? And when we went with customer on the call, we realized that, oh, there is a specific kind of a proxy setup which we have not tested for and the system was not ready for, right? And then we gave a workaround to the customer at that point in time. But when we came back, we knew that, okay, currently we are not supporting specific kind of proxies, right? So what can be done over there? So in next 2 months, our goal was, can we increase the number of proxies we support through our, because we find with each large organization, there can be n number of setups available, and then you need to you may have proxies, antiviruses, and whatnot running on the customer premise, right? How you can actually ensure that if setup is like that, still your product is working, right? The other example it was when I was working with one of the ticketing teams. We were delivering the URLs for the tickets via SMS, right? And what was happening was that for the specific kind of handsets, the URLs were malformed. It was not uh, uh, OS specific. It was not, except some of the versions of specific mobiles, it was working fine, right? And what we did was we got that feedback, we looked into it and fixed it, right? And there was a way customers were already solving it, right? And when we reached out to other customers, hey, why you are not reporting this issue? They said that, okay, while we are not able to use this link, we already know that this ticket is also available in app. So we go in app, we go into orders, and after orders, we access that ticket and then show it, right? So, but then it's a 4-step process, right? When it should be a single click process for that particular person. While customers don't complain sometimes, but that is where you can, if you are listening properly to the customers, you are able to understand, hey, these might be the challenges, and then you would be able to solve those for your customers. So yeah, so with product support, I think the most important part is it tells a lot about what is not working in your product, right? So there's a lot of product issues. Yeah. Second is you are able to see where your documentation is having gaps, or where you are missing in terms of how you are showing your documentation or videos or blogs, etc., right? The third important aspect is you are able to measure in terms of what is the frequency of these issues are, and you can measure the impact, right? So while based on the customer, you can measure the revenue impact as well as the time to mitigate, etc., right? So this becomes a very, very important channel for the customers. Now I will talk about the monitoring tools. uh, Having a product that works amazingly smooth is kind of necessity today, right? And when how do you feel when the web page is taking long to load, or transaction fails with a reason which says 404, which is unknown, right? While monitoring is generally a preview of engineering needs, have it is important that as PMs you talk with your engineering counterparts and talk in terms of high level service matrices. And these should be then bubbled up in your reviews so that there can be a deep insights in terms of systems stability, scalability, and resilience, right? For example, you have built a very, very nice looking car, right? What will happen when the person actually starts, or customer actually starts using your car, right? Uh, do you like to know if somebody is braking in actual environment? Does it work expected or not? How are the gear transition, etc., right? Or how it's providing the optimal experience to customer when they are doing the gear change, right? This is a way you can monitor, right? So monitoring is a way to measure all this, right? But then you don't need to know all the nitty-gritties as a PM, right? You don't need to understand each time what happens with when somebody changes a gear, right? But on a high level, is it smooth or not, right? So that is the high level details you should be asking your engineering counterparts, if you work with anyone else in the team, to know what's happening, right? What is your SLA? What is your service level objectives are? Is if you're building a, if you're allowing a click, how much long the customer needs to wait? Is there a SLO defined over there? If there's a page loading which are with a lot of information, how much long should customer be allowed to wait, right? uh, it's a, somebody may simply say that, hey, it's an engineering problem. If you are loading so many things, it can take 10 seconds or 20 seconds, right? But as a advocate of a customer, you should have a say in it, right? That even if it's taking 20 seconds, is there a way you can reduce it to 2 seconds? Or is there a way you can tell customer that, okay, it will take 20 seconds, you have to wait for 20 seconds, or by the time it loads, there's other information that comes up which provides some guidance to the customer, right? So there are different ways to solve it, but you would be able to only find these things if you have that information on the tool telemetry or the monitoring of the system. So there are a lot of tools out there in the market, New Relic, Azure as your monitor, Datadog, which gives you a very good view of the system performance. They collects, analyze, and reports performance matrices, right? And admins can view collected data on dashboards, uh, which are automatically created, right? So you can have the insights created for you. You can do a cross application tracking. What if you are dependent on a third-party app, right? Or if there's an integration with other partner, if it goes down, how do you measure it, right? So having a monitoring cross app tracking really helpful. All right, now we will come to the part where we are going to talk a little bit about the product strategy, the roadmap. And when we talk about these things, right, first thing is how you are aligning these with the organization goals, right? So there has to be a ways that the product strategy and product roadmap that you are building is something that is what organization is also trying to achieve, right? And there are multiple ways to do it. One of the approaches that gets followed in the large product organization groups is to define OKRs at the level of the organization, right? So it's more like a top-down approach where there is a OKR at the organization level, then you have a OKR at product level or your org level, and then there are further OKRs, right? So there is a way that you can take when you have a multi-step organization and multiple products under a single umbrella. So one of the benefits of having these linked OKRs is that there's a clear goal, or you know what you are moving in the organization, right? That is really helpful when you go into discussions with your senior leadership, and it's easier to project what you are trying to achieve, because everything that you are going to do is going to be there impacting something which is larger throughout the organization, right? There are other approaches that also get followed when somebody is defining a product roadmap. It can be a bottom-up approach based on a BU, or it can be a project-specific objectives that can be taken up, right? So that's the approaches that you can take, right? But what it is product strategy should talk about, right? It's about creating value for customers and businesses, right? So while product strategy itself means nothing, the goal there is to provide the clarity to internal and external stakeholders, right? What you want to do, right? So you have a vision and how you are going to reach to that vision, right? And that is what your product strategy is trying to tell. What scenarios or problems that you are going to try to solve? What are the customer segments or personas you are going to target in coming 6 months, year, 2 years, 3 years, right? How you are trying to respond to competitors in markets, right? And next is there an approach that you are using for prioritization, right? Because in large organization or the big products, what's going to happen is there's always going to be a clash. That you have limited resources and you want to do so many things, right? So there has to be a prioritization report approach, and it's always good to have that in your product strategy document. And next comes is the product roadmap, which is more like a shared source of truth, which outlines the vision, direction, priorities of the product over a period of time. Now, when we talked about the feedback, right, I think one of the important aspect is understand not all feedback is equal, right? And when you are trying to prioritize the feedback, you have to think in terms of what you are looking to optimize for, right? Because there are too many factors. There's engagement, there's a growth, there's revenue, there's user experience. You want to onboard new customers, right? You have to think in terms of in the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, what are the things that you are trying to move. You won't be able to move everything. So there has to be a way you prioritize things. Okay, my focus for next 6 months is revenue, so I need to focus on that, right? And how do you actually have this feedback, right? How do you actually use that feedback, right? So there are multiple ways to do it. One is you create an explicit KR based on the feedback, right? So you have a customer from a Fortune 500 company who is giving you continuous feedback, same feedback for last 6 months. Might be if it's the largest customer, you will prioritize it on the top, right? While there is a SMB who you have just onboarded using a premium model and he's trying to provide you a feedback, you might not want to prioritize it at the same level, right? So best way is first measure the feedback and based on that create OKRs, right? So if there's already an objective, try to map it with a key result which will solve the specific feedback, right? That is the second way of doing it. You already have the key results, you map that, okay, this feedback is going to be resolved by this particular key result. Okay. Third is you can have multiple feedbacks and then you think, okay, this all falls into a category of, let's say, scalability. There is an issue when somebody is trying to use 10 licenses or somebody is trying to use 20 machines in parallel, the system is not working, right? So if these are disparate feedbacks, but they fall under a same kind of a scenario, you may want to create a single objective and define a key result around it. And so what happens most of the times is that product strategy is considered as a static one-time activity, right? You write one document and then that document is there, nobody again goes back to it, right? So it's important that first version of document just act as a baseline, right? Based on what you thought about the market competition. Over the period of time, the document should be updated so that it can call out that with respect to the market and competition, how you are now responding. And the aim of the future version of the document is to keep this document updated, right? So that you are able to understand how you are progressing, what are the granular level of growth that happened over a quarter, semester. So it's not necessary that you need to update your product strategy after 6 months, right? You might think, keep going back to that document and keep putting more information there so that when you come back at 18 months, you should be able to know, hey, where I have reached and how I would be moving next 18 months, right? Awesome. So to do that, how you do it, you take inputs from business, strategy, and marketing teams, think of it as a live documents and keep those OKRs, right? If you have defined OKRs or key results or KPIs, whatsoever you are creating, right? Keep definitive frequency for update and review. And then there are other channels that you could keep using, right? There is these monthly reviews you can do with your senior leadership, quarterly reviews you can do it with your senior leadership. So that's what I quickly wanted to cover. And with that, I will stop. I think I took 10 minutes more than I thought I will take. But yeah, now I will go through chat and then I will try to answer those. Or if there's any, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So first of all, thank you for the very informative session that you conducted so far. Yeah, we just have a little more than 6.5 minutes. So we'll be picking up as many questions as possible. We'll try to bombard you with as many questions as possible. So if you can kind of help us with your views on these questions. So to help you further, what I'll do is I'll narrow down some of the questions and I'll isolate. So let me start with the first one. So something on the lines of what are the tools that you primarily use on a day-to-day basis as a person, as a PM of a scalable product or a hyper-scaled product? Yeah.
So I think while there are a lot of tools which has got implemented, right? What we look at on monthly or weekly basis is first is the growth, right? So what we have actually done is we have dashboards that we have created for our product usages. So we keep a view in terms of telemetry, right? What is my growth? Which features are being used, right? So the things that we called out in product telemetry, all those things are something that are available on that dashboard. And the focus is to see how they are moving, right? That is the first part we keep on looking. The second is the support, right? For support, because being Azure, we have a lot of customers and we keep on getting a lot of support cases, right? We keep on a view in terms of how it's happening, right? Are we seeing an uptick in number of cases? Are we seeing any specific trends in our cases, right? That is on a weekly basis we keep on looking at. And then there is all these analytical, behavioral analytical analysis that we do on a lower frequency. Then we look at the product analytics metrics.
Okay, fair enough. So is this all, is this all like internally built tools, or do you also kind of take ready-made tools from the like off-the-shelf tools?
We have internal, most of our tools are internal tools.
Okay, this is interesting.
So these are anyways because we already have a suite of tools that are mostly available for other organizations to also use.
Okay, so that's wonderful. Now coming to the next point, I think you touched a very sensitive issue here around scalable products, which is why would a customer stick to you? It's only when you provide them that kind of quality of service, right? So when it comes to deciding or figuring out what brings in the wow factors, I saw you mentioned that there could be some feedback loop, there could be some surveys being done. Okay, now how do you kind of plan? Okay, so let's say you want to figure out what should be the next best solution that you want to provide to your customers. So can you just walk us through probably at a very high level, if you can just share what is the strategy behind it? How do you build up that idea, or what is the ideation behind what kind of survey needs to be done, or what kind of questionnaires need to be prepared, or what is the mechanism or the channel that we should avail to kind of get this input? So how do you actually work it out for a product that already has, like, it's a very matured product? There's nothing much that comes to our mind that this we can improve further. So what do you do in such cases?
Sure. So I think one of the things is that you look at the, so as I covered in terms of the voice of customers, right? There are a lot of channels out there. If you start tapping into, right? Like we have a page where you can give the feedback, right? And we see a lot of customers give a lot of different kinds of inputs, right? So there's always this input that is coming in, right? So as a PM of a very highly used product, you never have lack of inputs. The challenge is how do you prioritize, because there's going to be so much of the inputs, right? So how we go about actually prioritizing is important part, right? And when we think about the prioritization, first is what we are trying to achieve for next 1-2 years for the organization, right? Let's say if I am thinking the Azure is the world's computer and this computer has to be the most scalable, resilient, right? So then stability and resilience come to your mind, right? And then you see what is the feedback from the customer, which might be making our system to be less stable, or there's lack of resilience due to some reason, right? And that automatically then goes to the top, right? So that's where the top-down OKRs help you in terms of thinking, in terms of what's necessary for organization or where organization is trying to go.
Okay, wonderful. So it's primarily on the lines of like from a top-down approach, you got to kind of isolate and figure out the OKRs, and basis on the most important and vital ones, you would want to build up some sort of a survey that would possibly kind of help you decide what should the next feature be. Now, thinking from a top-down approach, who is the primary person responsible to initiate this conversation? Is it the PM of that particular product? Like, is it a group head of that product, or is it the CEO of Microsoft who kind of boils down to it? I mean, how does it really flow down the chain?
Right. So see, you have at organization level, you define that what we are trying to project in market, right? That is a CEO's office call, right? In next 1.5 years, these are the goals we will want to look at, right? Once the CEO's office has decided that this is what we are trying to achieve in next 1.5 year, it depends on the hierarchy where you fall, right? So as a product, what is your say or what is your power, right? Based on that, you can decide that, okay, I will contribute to this particular OKR in this particular way, right? So let's say we talked about this. Let's say we talked about how many VMs are working fine, right? Or how do we increase success of VMs, right? Now there can be, for a VM team or any team which is managing VMs, there can be different ways, right? Because there are different components when we talk about VM. There is a compute, there's a networking, there is a PaaS service running on it, there's a OS running on it, right? There are a lot of things that are there. Now you as a PM, because you are consolidating the feedback continuously, right? You can see out of these 4 areas, which one is the area which is the most painful currently for our major customers, right? And then you build something for them.
Got it. Got it. Okay. We already at time. I'll try to squeeze in 2 more questions if it's okay with you.
Sure. Yeah. I can be
Okay.
here for 5 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. So one more question is, considering, let's say you put up this questionnaire, right? You put up some sort of a survey, and Microsoft, being Microsoft, you would have millions of users using the product. With the volumes of feedback that flows in, how do you manage to handle it?
Yeah, that's the whole idea, is how do you put that qualitative feedback into a quantitative format, right? And that's where we say that, okay, if there's so much of information coming in, is there a way I can standardize it for my product, right? And that's where we try to see what is the repeatable pattern, and then you match it with your product telemetry, right? So you can see there is a product feature which is used most, and there's a lot of feedback coming about it, right? Then you will try to dig deeper and break that feedback into actionable points, right? So let's say there's a page load which is there for that particular product feature which displays a lot of information, right? Now it takes a lot of time to load, but that might be problem, right, for the consumer if they have taking longer time. Or it cannot be a problem because for most of your users are small users and they don't see an impact happening, right? So you have to break that feedback and see, okay, which segment, which persona this feedback is impacting to, and how much is the priority for solving for that particular persona, right? Because you cannot solve everything. As you said, that feedback comes in, a lot feedback comes in, right? So we try to ensure that we create buckets out of the feedback, and then out of that buckets, we try to see which persona, which feature it impacts most, and what is the value add for that for the customers.
Wonderful. So I think to some extent, from my personal knowledge, in such cases, a little bit of artificial intelligence is also kind of used regularly in the industry, which is primarily to kind of isolate and cluster, say, commonly occurring issues, or possibly pull out some issues that can be classed into different groups and categories. So I presume you would also be doing something similar right now, right?
Yeah, so we do have tools which will actually do that segmentation classification for you. But as I said, that the tools will go to extent, right? They would be able to pick things based on the classification, etc. But at the end of the day, it's good that if you look at some of this actual information as a PM, having that actual reading the actual comments from actual users are really, really useful. Well, yeah, these tools definitely help us to make a decision. Okay, this is the area where we need to figure or focus on in next 6 to 8 months. But yeah, I also prefer to look at some of these actual comments so that I do have a better context what might be happening with customers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, both are equally important. When you scale, you need machines to do the work for you, but you don't lose human intelligence to artificial intelligence. So you always got to retain your human intelligence. And what better than just going through the reviews of what humans have put in and being read by a human. So I think, yeah, human intelligence always has a big role to play, even if machines take over.
Right.
One final question before I wrap it up for the day, and I really appreciate you sitting with us post 9 as well. So this question is primarily to do with a lot of KPIs and analytics. So I see quite a few people have these questions around KPI and analytics. So I'll just, before I hand over the question to Pankaj, I'll just give all of you a little heads up that, see, friends, the question around what KPIs to use, what should be a North Star metric, this totally depends on your product. It's not that there's a general rule of thumb, and it's not that Pankaj can speak on behalf of what your product should use. So ideally, these are something that you should decide internally. And maybe what I can do is I can reword the question, and this will be a lot more oriented to Pankaj for the things that he is doing back at his work, instead of we trying to generalize and put a thumb rule as to this is the right way to decide on the metric. Metric is never decided that way. So Pankaj, what a lot of people have asked around KPIs and metrics is obviously very custom to their own problem statements. But if you were to kind of help people think in a very generalized manner, okay, how would you decide on the KPIs and let's say the North Star metric and club it with your product telemetry? So if you can give a generalized framework as a thought process for people to get started, if not probably do it in an expert manner, but at least to get started, take the first step into the space.
Sure. So
So
I think,
some golden words here, yeah.
yeah, first thing is you need to understand where your product lies in the product life cycle, right? That is very important because whether you are building a brand new product versus a mature product, right? The things you would like to measure are going to be very different, right? So first thing is look at where your product falls into that product life cycle category, right? And most of the products are going to be in growth or early stage, right? So that's first area. Second thing is what you are trying to achieve in next 6 months, right? Are you trying to onboard new users, which is like growth, or is it the engagement? You already have users who are paying to you, and then you are trying to say how I can make more money out of it, or how I can actually make them use my product more so that there can be more revenue through ads or whatsoever is your channel, right? So these are the two major things, right? So first is the product life cycle where it is, and second is you are trying to look at the engagement versus growth versus churn, right? So on the high level, if you have this idea, you can create a metrics and say, okay, these are the things I'm trying to cover. Once you have ticked those, that becomes like your North Star for next 6 to 12 months, right? But please don't stop there, right? Because the problem with single North Star metrics is that they might be not the right way, right? You should look what is building into it, right? So growth, if you are saying that, hey, I want to have a growth in next 6 months, don't just think that how the more users are going to come in, right? And if you think that I did a social media campaign and suddenly my users are increasing, might be true, might not be, right? So you should break that down into sub further metrics, right? So North Star should have at least L1 and L2 levels, which say that, hey, my North Star was growth. Second was, am I able to have growth through different channels, or is it only one channel that the growth is coming through? And second L2 can be, what was the way we were able to push that growth, right? So whether it was advertisement, did you do any new marketing campaign, etc., right? So having a North Star and then L1 and L2 matrices is a way to look at what you want to achieve in long term. Hope this answers most of the questions people had.
Yeah, I think this did answer quite a few questions. I mean, it was interesting to see. Probably, I think I saw nothing less than 7 to 8 questions around KPIs itself. So
Okay.
I think all in all, I mean, it was a great information. And I think there's one question which I think you have already answered, which is how do we identify customer services issues that are most frustrating for customers? Sriram, we just answered this 2 minutes back, wherein after taking feedbacks, you actually run some algorithms on using AI or data science to some extent as well, machine learning and data science, wherein you can isolate and figure out the most frequently occurring issues. So at scale, this is done using machines. So this is something I think Pankaj already shared 2 3 minutes back. So overall, I think Pankaj, great to have you today, and this was a wonderful chat. We got to know something that is very untouched. I mean, a lot of people don't discuss this in the open, which is around customer feedback, and this probably is the most important piece of the puzzle, which a lot of not only product managers but even companies altogether miss out. You launch a beautiful product, but you forget that it's not the product that will survive by itself. It is the post-product service that you're giving that will make sure that the product survives. So all in all, a great session, a lot of valuable insights from you, Pankaj. We are really glad that you kind of spend this quality time with us. And on behalf of the entire audience and the Insaid crowd and from my end as well, I thank you wholeheartedly for spending this time with us.
Sure. Thanks, Sujit. And I would
So
say
any
that
any parting words from your end? Yeah.
yeah. I was just saying that if anyone have any specific questions for me, you can ping me on LinkedIn and I can try to answer some of the questions. I understand what I told you is not exhaustive, right? And in product management, the challenge is that whatever we say is never final, right? There's something different or better you can always do. So always take things with a pinch of salt and understand what your exact situation is, and then brainstorm about it, then trying to follow something that is done in some other product, because it's not the same situation you are going to get in.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a huge space. There's no limit to it. And then if you club up modern world product management, that's like an entire ball game in itself. So there's a lot to do in product management.
Yeah.
So friends, before we wrap up today's session, a quick request from our end is please fill up the feedback form. It's a very important, like just as what Pankaj said, right? So feedback does help us understand where we stand and what are the things that we need to improve. So please take a moment from your time to kind of fill up the feedback form. I understand a lot of you are eagerly waiting for dinner, but a little 2-minute feedback would help all of us take it a long way. So thanks for all the folks who have already filled up the feedback form. We would really appreciate if everybody fills it up, and hope all of you had a good set of information that you captured in today's session. Do not forget, we have an upcoming session. Okay, so in this session, we'll be inviting our next speaker, Kalpesh Wani, who's technical product manager at Amazon. And this is going to be conducted on 27th. So 27th April from 8:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. So the timing will be a little different. It's 8:30, not 8. So please make sure all of you plan accordingly. So overall, I think let's make sure that these sessions add a lot of value to our learning. At the same time, please feel free to also reach out to the speakers because as Pankaj mentioned, 45 minutes for product management, sharing knowledge for a scalable product or scalable company, that's next to like saying you're just scratching the surface, right? So there's a lot that can be possible in this space. So thanks a lot, everybody, for attending today's session. And I wish Pankaj, thank you. I mean, I would like to wholeheartedly thank you, Pankaj. And I hope we our paths cross again. We would love to learn a lot from you in future as well.
Sure. Thanks, Sachet. Have a good day. Everybody, good night.
Yeah. Have a great evening. See you all. Bye.